We dreamed of escaping the typical British summer of rain, followed by showers, followed by more rain, by renting a light, character-filled sheet for a week's respite in sunny rural France. On a cold, wintry January, we leafed through brochures. Yeah, there were lots of things like that 20 years ago. Every holiday rental we saw looked absolutely perfect. We were at that early stage of parenthood where you're still very much pretending that a child does not impede your life at all, simply enhances it. We hadn't admitted to ourselves that every decision we took from now on would be scrutinized for dangers and vetted for possible hazards. We still perused each glossy page of French holiday homes with the eyes of childless 20-somethings. As long as the place had a pool to laze by and roomy enough fridge for several bottles of wine and other local delicacies, well, sure, we'd be fine. 7 months later, this cavalier attitude to gîte choosing had led us and two friends that we convinced to come along the way to arrive at a rickety, dark and uninviting artisan's cottage. It had been a long and tetchy journey. There had been many peace stops along the way. Our daughter was at that critical stage of toileting, but her need to go, unfortunately, rarely coincided with my own need to pee, which at 8 months pregnant was also frequent and often urgent. No, we hadn't factored our expanding family or my expanding stomach into our holiday rental decision-making process back in January either. After the aforementioned stilted journey, we arrived at dusk instead of mid-afternoon. The earlier heat and blue skies that had met us at Cherbourg had broken into fiery thunderstorms around Le Mans. By the time we reached the cottage, a dense summer drizzle had descended. The moment I entered the house, I had a sense of foreboding. It was ancient, yes, but not in a quaint, romantic way. It felt as if the century's inhabitants hadn't quite left, but merely soaked into the stone walls along with the damp. My dream of a stone-flagged farmhouse with French sunbeams streaming in faded rapidly. What we entered that drizzly August evening, exhausted and frazzled, was far from what the brochures had promised. The kitchen was functional and clean enough. The owners had kindly left a 4-page document on the table with rules, regulations, and helpful suggestions for troubleshooting when inevitable problems occurred. Electricity outage, toilet flooding, that sort of thing. As if by way of an anticipatory consolation, they had left a bottle of the local red and had been placed on top of the document. But I was in no mood of reading rules, and I headed off to explore the rest of the house. Off to the side of the kitchen was what had been aspiringly referred to in the literature as the playroom. It was, in fact, a dung-coloured lean-to annexed onto the kitchen by 2 steep and treacherous-looking stone steps. Watching my daughter, Tita, as she navigated these, I gingerly followed her. It quickly became apparent that the muted colours and earnestness of the French toys held no interest for this English toddler. My daughter was used to the garish coloured plastic of the Early Learning Centre. Books about rabbits called Fifi and beautifully crafted wooden draft pieces held no interest for her. Once the contents of the toy box had been emptied out onto the threadbare rug, she moved on. I lingered a moment longer, puzzled at the room and its contents, grappling through my fudgy, pregnant brain to work out what it was that was wrong with the room. The toys, it seemed, were old yet new, from at least a decade ago, and yet somehow untouched. Whatever the issue, the room was less than inviting, and I left as quickly as I could, as my large frame allowed, following my toddler upstairs. At the centre of the old house was a wooden spiral staircase. The steps were worn and uneven from centuries of footfall. A quirky Gallic electrician had placed ill-thought-out light switches halfway between floors. The master bedroom was in the attic space, and it wasn't really any bigger than the other bedroom. The room was dark, and although the bed was clean and smartly made up with a quilted eiderdown, the damp in the walls emitted a musty smell. It was clear that any visions I had of streaming morning sunshine would be impeded by a complexity of wooden shutters and heavy curtains at the small window. A wooden cot sat squat in the corner of the room. There was something inexplicably sad about the bright and bold bunny painted on its end. I decided immediately, and without proper reason, that our little girl would sleep instead in the newly acquired travel cot we had brought with us just in case. Somehow my tired and grumpy husband managed to squeeze it into an already cramped room heavy with mahogany furniture. However, after this inauspicious start, the holiday progressed well enough. I'll admit, I endured rather than enjoyed, but I put that down to the fact that combining heat, a fiercely independent, often truculent toddler, a rotund and breathless mother, and unfamiliar surroundings fraught with hidden dangers, well, it wouldn't be the ideal combination anywhere. The other adults accepted the house's flaws in the daytime and imbibed just enough local rough red wine in the evening to be oblivious to the nighttime eeriness of the ancient wood and stone structure that I noticed. Our daughter woke nightly with night terrors, blank-eyed and inconsolable. And although I hadn't remembered these happening to her before this holiday, our well-thumbed parenting manual assured me that it was perfectly normal. In the daytime, she seemed no different than usual, spending the time alternating between angelic and exuberant and outraged and demonic, normal toddler behavior. Everyone but me was surprised and disappointed then when the final day of the holiday arrived. We were due to leave at 1 p.m. It was, of course, a glorious summer's day, possibly the best we'd had. As the other adults busied themselves with packing and cleaning, I attempted to catch the last rays of the sun, of the French sunshine. I attempted to catch the last rays of the morning sun out by the pool, keeping one eye on our daughter, who was playing by the edge of the water. Earlier in the week, she had acquired 3 wind-up toy snails from a flamboyant market stall holder. Her chubby little fingers had finally worked out the mechanics of the winder, and she sat delighted with herself. She sat delighted with herself, watching the vivid escargot wobble across the patio. Suddenly, I was touched by her delicate, vulnerable beauty. She was togged up in her favorite tweeny swimming costume, her pale skin slick with sunblock. The blue float belt that she'd been sporting all week was cast aside on the concrete pool edge. I closed my eyes against the bright Dordogne sunshine, secretly relieved that our week's stay in this strange and unsettling house was nearly over. My eyes felt heavy. The previous night's precarious bathroom visit down the slippery stairs, and then having to soothe my daughter on my return, had finally caught up with me. I was exhausted. My eyes were closed for less than 3, maybe 4 minutes, but when I opened them, my daughter was no longer there. The patio spot where she'd been happily playing was void of child and of the snails. I lumbered off the low sun lounger into a sitting position and called her name. It was then that I spotted the cerise pink of the tweeny costume in the water. No, beneath the water. On the sparkling surface of the pool, 3 brightly coloured plastic snails bobbed. I shouted her name at this time as I manoeuvred my pregnant body out of the low, unforgiving sun lounger, making my way as quickly as possible to the other corner of the pool. My mind had a vision of her setting the snails in the water, then with excited focus following them step by step into the pool. Only when she stepped off that last step into the 1 meter shallow end would she have realized that she was in over her head. By the time I got halfway round the pool edge, I could see she was moving. I shouted random names now, my husband's, my friends', anybody's, not just hers. I could see that she was not just moving, but flailing. Her dark baby hair slicked back from her smooth face. Her eyes were wide open, long eyelashes curled right back. A split second, as I was trying to get close enough to her, her expression changed from serene to panic as she decided this was not okay. I willed her to keep paddling and keep her mouth shut, but she began to protest as she would have on land, her mouth opening and closing, taking in unwanted pool water. Looking back, it was probably only a matter of seconds before I reached her. But before I could bend my cumbersome shape over the water, a solid, reliable hand swooped down, gained purchase on a flailing, sun-creamed limb, and scooped up my little girl from out of the pool. My friend, hearing my cries, had rushed from the house and reached the pool before I could. Much spluttering and coughing and regurgitating water ensued. Then, as adults do, we convinced the little one and ourselves as well that it was nothing more than a funny escapade, chasing snails. What a silly Billy. My friend and I exchanging only the briefest of glances, acknowledging what it might have been. Then a few short hours later, with bags packed and beds stripped, we locked the house and we placed the keys in the rusted letterbox by the gate. As I clicked my little girl into her car seat safely and watching her drowsily stick her thumb into her rose mouth, I glanced back up at the house. It looked perfectly normal now, perfectly pleasant in the sunshine, but the aching sadness and unspoken fear that I had sensed there each and every night, that still lingered there. I would never know what had happened within those walls. All I did know was how grateful I was that the house had not added another tragedy to its history on that our last day.